Not too long ago, we took a look at the worst weapons in all of Halo. But one thing that was really interesting about it is when we were doing research for that video, we really had to look at how that weapon individually performed against the variants and versions that we had seen throughout the years in other Halo titles. And along the way, we often found ourselves considering why one weapon just wasn't as good in that game when you compare it to an awesomer version in a different game. So we wanted to kind of flip that idea on its head and talk about some of the weapons from Halo that were just the best of the best and why they were actually so much fun to use. So let's go ahead and jump into this. So we gotta go all the way back to the good old days of Halo Combat Evolved, when Mountain Dew, Cheetos, and actually meeting up with people in person to play video games was actually a really cool concept. Yes, the game that started it all, Halo Combat Evolved. And one thing that right away everyone is going to be, what is Halo without the Combat Evolved pistol? I mean, let's be real. This was a god pistol. It was so amazing, and there was such an interesting meta around this gun. The fact that you could essentially rely on something that you would typically expect to be a secondary backup choice for a weapon and just absolutely destroy with. It's funny to see that so many people preferred using the pistol over a lot of the other weapons in the game just because of how well it worked in a precision setting and just the competitive edge that went with that. And while there's been various different types of handguns throughout the years in Halo, the Halo CE one is kind of like the Thanos version of the weapon, where despite the various pistols that come out over the years, we're always brought back to loving that Halo CE pistol. And that's probably one of the reasons why Halo 5 actually just straight up put the Halo CE pistol in the game. And while there was other attempts to replicate the Halo CE pistol, like in the Halo Reach title update back in the day, we actually really like the way it was handled in Halo 5 more than anything else, because it just kind of owned the fact that that gun was overpowered and just let people use it in limited controlled settings, and that was really cool. But before I just go on talking about the pistol from Halo CE for 10 minutes, which I easily could, we can also really appreciate the Halo CE shotgun. There's something about the Halo CE shotgun that feels definitely fitting for whatever type of meta you're playing it in. In some games like Call of Duty, it seemed like it was really difficult to find a good and fair balance for things like shotguns. But then when you play a game like Halo Combat Evolved, while obviously some people are going to disagree with this, and that's probably why the shotgun has been changed so many times over the years, I really like the way that the Halo C shotgun doesn't normally one-shot kill unless it's a headshot, and still to an extent gives players a time to react and come up with some sort of method to combat it, but it's still a power weapon at the same time. And then you can look at Halo 2 and Halo 3, where the shotgun was just drastically different in each iteration later. You kind of appreciate Halo Combat Evolved for the type of shotgun it had. This next one's another one we were really unsure if we should even include in this video. Going into it and doing research on this, we thought, you know, this gun, it could really be said for a lot of various Halo games. It's so iconic in so many different Halo games. So we decided, just why not, let's load up some Sidewinder snipers only and see if the Halo Combat Evolved sniper is really that much better than the rest. Oh my goodness, we had forgotten something very important in Halo. There's not really much to be said here, it's just the sniper just has some sort of incredible overpowered range with it, where you could just pick off people from miles away. There's really interesting mechanics that go behind it that we didn't fully understand. It seems like sometimes you need to lead your shot depending on how zoomed in you are, but you are definitely very capable if you have a sniper, and especially if it's Halo Combat Evolved sniper. Not to say that the snipers really became drastically worse in other Halo games. There definitely was a dip off by the time Halo Reach rolled around. Maybe Halo 4 and later, the snipers didn't feel as tight. But if you look at the main 3 Halo games that originally came out, snipers pretty good across the board. But the Halo CE's one, that was just something kind of special. Now, in the last video, we definitely talked about how Halo 2's Needler was just absolutely awful, and we wanted to talk about the Needler, and Halo CE was really interesting because it introduced the Needler, and the Needler did so much, in my opinion, for Halo as a whole, just kind of introducing this concept that you're fighting against aliens and you could pick up the alien weapons, and they're different and they're weird and they have their own use for them. And the Needler in Combat Evolved was good, maybe even a little too good, where they nerfed it so poorly into Halo 2 when they added dual wielding, but then in Halo 3 they just said whatever and they just upped it to infinity community and gave people the most overpowered needler you have ever seen. Not only does it still do the heat-seeking type of stuff it's always done, but the super combined explosions that happen can absolutely launch a player back. It doesn't take much to cause one of those to happen that does extra damage, and the needler just became this overpowered god weapon in the Halo 3 competitive scene. But maybe we're getting a little too ahead of ourselves, but if you back up to Halo 2, there were some really interesting weapons that were introduced there as well. It's like when they were developing Halo 2, they kind of realized a lot of people were just going for the pistol, and that was cool and all, but they thought, well, what if, we just took the assault rifle as the main gun, that iconic looking assault rifle, and just kind of mixed it with a pistol and have some sort of in-between precision weapon, and thus the Halo 2 BR was born. And while, of course, Halo 2's pistol was nowhere even remotely close to as good as Halo 1's pistol, we did get the BR out of this adjustment, and having a precision rifle would be huge for the franchise, and a lot of people really love the way the Halo 2 BR played, more so than any other iteration, more than Halo 3's BR, more than Halo Reach's DMR, and it was also cool that Halo 5 Guardians, threw in the Halo 2 BR once again, even though it's still not quite as good as the original Halo 2 BR. Same with Halo 2 Anniversary, they have the BR in there, still not the same feeling as the original Halo 2 BR, but there was something about just the snappiness of using the Halo BR, and just kind of feeling like you could rely on your rifle for your gameplay. That probably did a lot for the competitive scene of Halo, feeling like now it's not as much as a luck-based RNG type arena game, but it actually comes down to who has the most skill. And it even introduced things like doing button combos in an FPS game to cancel reload quickly and get a higher fire rate off. It was just really interesting to see stuff like that introduced with Halo 2, and the BR deserves to be appreciated for its legacy that it created. And then on the other side, there's a really underrated gun, but the Halo 2 carbine was kind of this competitor to the BR, and honestly, while people go for the BR all day, every day, and a lot of game types cater to it, the carbine was probably at its best in Halo 2 as well. You work with this gun with somewhat of a trigger finger, and while it's not exact trigger finger, you can shoot that gun really quickly and rapidly rack up some headshots and take out an enemy pretty fast. And the carbine also was very reliable back in Halo 2. Also, plasma pistols became way more involved when Halo 2 rolled around with the new health mechanic that Halo 2 had over Halo 1's. The plasma pistol became a reliable source for the first time to quickly come up with a way to take players out. And introducing things like the noob combo, which was something that had been around for a long time, really was kind of overused or overemphasized in the community, because not only could you dual wield the plasma pistol with just about any dual wieldable weapon, you could also pop that BR out whenever you needed to and just quickly take out an enemy. And which is how snappy Halo 2 was, it definitely was a go-to strategy back in the day. And then we can't leave Halo 2 without talking about the energy sword. Yeah, the energy sword was finally a usable weapon when Halo 2 rolled around, and it would continue to be for later Halo games moving forward. But in Halo 2, it let you just straight up fly. I mean, if you played Modern Warfare 2 and you ever put on, a combat knife with Commando Pro or something like that, you thought the lunge was maybe a little bit excessive in that game. Nope, you've never played Halo 2 before, because the lunge in that is just something beyond anything you've probably ever experienced. And they would go on to definitely reduce this and balance the sword out later on, but it was really fun to use back then because of how over the top and overpowered it was. Though it did have the one setback where occasionally you could just lunge yourself off of platforms when trying to sword someone, it still was pretty good to use. It would only be a few years before Halo 3 would release, and like we've already mentioned, a lot of weapons saw some nerfs along the way. The BR wasn't quite as quick, the shotgun had less ammo, the needler was overpowered, but for the most part it seemed like a lot of things were really refined based off of what Halo 2 had kind of adjusted. But at the same time, while we saw some nerfs here and there with Halo 3's weapon pool, we did see some really positive changes for some weapons that weren't really that good when Halo 2 originally was released. For instance, the adjustments to the brute shot definitely made the gun a little more usable, where in Halo 2 it felt kind of all over the place. At least in Halo 3 you could use it against vehicles, or you could even kind of use it to take down people's shields and then try to take them out, where in Halo 2 it just wasn't really a strategic weapon to use in player versus player. Plus it was really fun to use in custom games. Also along the way, we felt like Halo 3 maybe had the best rocket launcher of any type of rocket launcher we had seen. It definitely felt like the control over this gun was really straightforward, and it was easy to kind of rack up some kills and rely on this gun more so than in other iterations. When Halo Reach rolled around, they added a fire delay delay or a missile drop, whatever you want to call it, that did affect that weapon pretty heavily. And we just really like the way that Halo 3 worked out with the rocket launcher. It led for a lot of custom games. We could do kind of crazy things with the rocket launcher, and that's kind of important to us. Also, a couple of guns were introduced here, and they were probably the best versions of the gun that we have seen to date. We have the Spartan laser, which was so much fun to use. So many things that just came out of this gun. It's a gun that really looks powerful, and it shouldn't be as effective as it is, but it just is so unique of an idea, and it was cool to see something like this introduced so late in Halo's life cycle. It was already the third game, and we're still seeing an innovative weapon unlike anything we'd seen in other games. And then also the gravity hammer, something that a lot of people saw as some sort of weapon when we looked at Halo 2, when we played through Halo 2's campaign. The gravity hammer was finally introduced in Halo 3, and it feels so powerful. It feels more powerful than it sounds in Halo 2. You feel the movement of the world just kind of shake beneath you when you swing that hammer. Halo Reach still had a great gravity hammer as well, but in later iterations like Halo 4 especially, it felt like the gravity hammer was significantly changed and nerfed, and the sound effects that it made and the way that it played just didn't feel as satisfying as it did in Halo 3. And real quick, we are going to jump into Halo Reach in a second, but we do want to acknowledge Halo 3 ODST because the campaign did introduce some unique versions of weapons that we hadn't really gotten to use yet. We had, of course, the ODST SMG that was suppressed and had a scope on it, and that was such a unique idea from Bungie to include this version of the weapon, because not only does the SMG play completely differently in Halo 3 ODST, when you're playing a game like Halo 3 ODST that's really just built upon the same exact engine that the previous game was on, the game easily could have felt like a rehashed Halo 3. But by introducing a gun like this, and the pistol, that is another gun we wanted to talk about, even though it doesn't outclass the Halo CE pistol, the combination of these two weapons did so much into making ODST its own unique experience that had gameplay unlike the other Halo games. And it's definitely one of those underrated things that people don't talk as much about when they praise Halo 3 ODST. The fact that it kind of put players in a very different sandbox from what they're used to, while still of course being built upon the sandbox that was so massive as that of Halo 3, really led its own unique experience over everything else. Halo Reach is kind of a mixed bag. There's going to be a lot of varying opinions when we get into what Reach did as a whole, but we do want to acknowledge the DMR here. While it isn't the BR by any means, it is its own gun, and depending on how you feel about weapon bloom and all these other things, it can be kind of up in the air, but we did want to acknowledge the DMR just because it did a lot for Halo Reach in its own right, and what Halo Reach became as a unique game that stands apart from all of the other Halo games. And any die-hard Reach fan, whether they played through the campaigns on lasso difficulty or they were really big on the Reach multiplayer, probably has an appreciation for the DMR, more so than general Halo fans that have played all the Halo games and had to use a DMR along the way. I think it's kind of a niche thing, but we definitely feel like the DMR still deserves its spot on the list, specifically the Reach DMR, more so than any other version of that. And of course, we can't talk about Halo Reach without talking about the introduction of the grenade launcher. This gun was so much fun to use. It was pretty overpowered in a lot of settings, and then it also served as an EMP timed explosive if you wanted to detonate it whenever you felt like it. And not only were there some amazing trick shots people pulled off using the grenade launcher, but it was actually a valuable enough weapon to use where you could jump into a multiplayer game and get some work done with it, but also it wasn't overpowered enough where you felt like you were just against incredible odds. You kind of had to know how to use the grenade launcher to be successful with it. Halo 4 kind of comes down to a mixed bag when you look at its weapons. Some weapons are good, but they're probably not the greatest and most iconic variants of the weapons, though we do have to appreciate a couple of things that came out of Halo 4. First, the sticky detonator. What a great idea for a gun. It's so much fun to use. It led to so many hilarious action-sack game types, and while I could criticize Halo 4 for days and days and days, just give me a sticky detonator and I'll be distracted for a little while and it's a good old time. Similarly, whether you like the gun or not, or whether it was balanced properly or not, the railgun's also a really fun gun to use along the way when you're playing the game. So if you have a game type that's a sticky detonator and a railgun, you're looking for an even better time. And while we've mostly covered Halo 5 already, just because we're talking about the variants that were added in, we can really appreciate for sure the Norfang and the Whiplash as two great guns that were added into Halo 5 Guardians. We don't need to talk all day specifically about why these guns are so great. The big takeaway is that while you could love or hate Halo 5 Guardians as much as you want, but you can't deny the fact that 343 did something really different and introduced introduced a ton of variance to the weapons. So if players were making their own types of games, they could balance each weapon out however they wanted. And this did give 343 the sandbox and tools to tweak matchmaking and multiplayer experiences by using the revolving types of weapons to best balance out the game types that were there. Now, of course, Halo 5 Guardians had its own issues when it came to sustaining a player base, but this is something that we hope is brought back in some way in Halo Infinite, just because it leads to more freedom and more possibilities and better ways to refine things without completely overhauling the way that they can function in the game. But those were our picks for the best weapons of Halo across the years. You probably agree with us on every single one of them, no disagreements whatsoever. Am I right? But honestly, there's definitely weapons we missed along the way. There's definitely some you probably disagree with. So go ahead and leave a comment down below. We will read our comments, so have at it. But hey, if you liked this video, can you take a quick moment first? Double check you are in fact subscribed down below with notifications on. It helps us out a lot. We get to do more stuff like this, and that's cool. Also, if you want to talk with us on Twitter, you can follow me at Rocket Elijah, and you can also follow Luke at Rocket Sloth Luke. So feel free to follow us on there and communicate with us a bit. We would kind of appreciate it. But otherwise, that's it for today, guys. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you all next time.